Welcome to Keto Meals and Recipes.com. I love baking cookies, especially during the holidays. It's so nice to have lots of treats on hand, ready to be served when you have friends and family come by. And that's why today I'm really happy to show you how I make these absolutely delicious, melt-in-your-mouth Raspberry Almond Shortbread Thumbprint cookies. If you're new to my channel, I just want to mention that all of my recipes, including these cookies, are sugar-free, gluten-free, keto recipes. These are just a healthier version of the classic shortbread thumbprint cookie, except healthier. And I'm absolutely sure that none of you guests will be able to tell the difference. The link for mentioned videos and the written recipe are in the description box. So please go down there to check it out. To make these amazing thumbprint cookies, you will have to refer to my seedless raspberry jam video, which I posted last week. And I mentioned that the jam can be made ahead and stored in your fridge for quite a while. But do make extra and enjoy as a topping for breakfast, which you can spread on some of my delicious pecan bread or pecan bread toast. Although these cookies are quite decadent, the macronutrient ratio for each Raspberry Almond Shortbread Thumbprint cookie is 4:1, with 4.3 grams of total carbs, 1.9 gram of soluble fiber, 1 gram of insoluble fiber, resulting in 1.4 grams of net carbs per 24-gram cookie. For this recipe, I will explain how to make the melt-in-your-mouth shortbread cookie dough two different ways. One is manual with no special equipment, and the other way is by using a food processor. The method is a little bit different, so keep watching. As well, I will show you two different ways to make the thumbprints themselves. When it's time to preheat your oven, you'll have to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius. But you don't do this right away. You wait until after you have chilled the finished dough balls, and I'll explain that a bit later. As a final prep step, get a full-size baking sheet and line it with parchment paper, and then set the baking sheet aside for a moment. Because I want light and flaky shortbread cookies, I'm going to sift all my dry ingredients. Because by sifting, you aerate and get rid of any clumps. Begin by putting a fine mesh sieve over your mixing bowl. And now I'm going to add my almond flour, my sweetener, which I ground to fine confectioner powder, and inulin fiber. I highly recommend you use inulin for these cookies. The light sweet taste of this inulin fiber enhances the taste and texture of these cookies. And for natural binder, I prefer to use glucomannan, also known as konjac root powder. And lastly, I also add the coconut flour. And then whisk to sift all the ingredients through the sieve. And after you've sifted everything, stir to combine. The first method I'm going to show you how to make the shortbread cookie dough is the good old-fashioned way, with your hands. Before adding the butter, I would strongly recommend that you weigh and cut your frozen butter to the correct weight. Please be precise, because if you add too much butter, your cookies will flatten when you bake them. Now I'm going to use the large holes on the box grater and begin by grating 1/3 of my frozen butter, at which point just stop and fold the butter into the dry ingredients and toss it around. Grate the second third of the butter and again coat the butter with the dry ingredients and repeat for the last third of the butter. Doing it in 3 stages like this will prevent the butter from clumping, which will make it very hard to then make a crumbly dough. The next step is to take a handful of your butter and dry mixture and start by rolling it in between your fingers. This is kind of hard to explain, so just please watch. With this method, what you're doing is you're actually both combining the ingredients and at the same time creating a very rough dough. When the dough is just starting to form, I would stop and then add my almond extract. And continue rolling the dough between your fingers to form a very large granular dough that looks something like this. With this dough, you don't want everything to be completely homogeneously combined, because when you look at the dough, you should be able to see some of the butter within the granulated dough. And that's the manual method. Now, Method 2 uses a food processor. You do all the steps up to the grating and combining of the butter. Then pour this butter and dry ingredient mixture into the food processor bowl. Then pulse for 2 seconds about 3 times. At which point you pour in the almond extract and pulse for 2 seconds 2 more times. The end product should be a very granular looking dough. At this point, the dough is ready to be shaped. However, if your kitchen is really warm and the dough feels a little bit too pliable and warm, cover the bowl and refrigerate for 30 to 60 minutes. To make the perfect texture for your shortbread, you have to work with cold cookie dough. Now, my dough is nice and chilled and it's time to shape the cookies, so I'm going to use a 1 tablespoon ice cream scoop. Next, scoop out the dough from your bowl and use a knife to level off the extra dough. Then drop the dough into your palm and roll into a ball using both of your palms like this. Then place each of these cookie dough balls onto the parchment-lined baking sheet. And as you put the rest of the cookie dough balls onto the baking sheet, make sure that they are 2 inches or 5 centimeters apart. And then repeat until you've rolled out all of your cookie dough balls. If you're precise, you should get about 19 dough balls. Now here are 2 different ways to make the thumbprints. Both work equally well, it's just a matter of preference. The first way is to gently hold the dough ball, then either using a dowel that's about the same size as your finger or one of your fingers, press down in the center to make a fairly deep indentation. And just repeat for all the rest of the dough balls. Or alternatively, just leave the dough in the shape of the balls. Whichever way you prefer, refrigerate the prepared cookies for at least 1 hour to chill the dough thoroughly, or even leave the dough in the fridge overnight. Please make sure that you pre-chill the dough before baking. Once your oven is preheated, place the chilled cookie dough straight from the fridge into the middle position of your preheated oven. And remember, you can have either the pre-shaped thumbprints or bake the balls as they are. Whichever method you choose, you bake them for 10 minutes. When it's time to take the cookies out of the oven, the cookies will look underdone, with just a light golden ring on the bottom of the cookie. This is exactly what you want. If you have made the indentation on your thumbprint cookies, all you have to do is remove the sheet of cookies, place it on the counter, and let the cookies rest for 10 minutes. However, if you've baked the shortbread as cookie balls, as soon as you take the tray from the oven, carefully with either a dowel or your finger, gently and deeply make an indentation in the center of the cookie, and then let the cookies rest for 10 minutes. You don't want to move the cookies right away because the cookies are very crumbly fresh out of the oven. After the cookies have rested, with a spatula, scoop and transfer the cookies onto a cooling rack. Or just leave the cookies where they are until they get to room temperature. For most cookies, but especially for these cookies, it's really important that you let the cookies cool to room temperature before you add any of the seedless raspberry jam. If the cookies are still warm when you're adding the jam, you'll find that the jam will spread and absorb into the cookie and it won't look as nice. When your cookies are nice and cool, then all you have to do is scoop about a half a teaspoon of jam and carefully place it into each indentation. When you're doing this, take your time and be precise because the jam will discolor the cookie very easily. These Raspberry Almond Shortbread Thumbprint cookies are absolutely perfect just as they are. And you can stop at this point. But since I'm making these cookies for Christmas, here's an optional final garnish step I'd like to share with you. I begin by melting some of my sugar-free white chocolate. You can either buy your favorite brand in the store or make your own. Because I need a very small piping bag, I'm going to use parchment to make my own. Take a piece of parchment, fold it in half, then fold it or roll it to make a triangular or cone shape. So that my cone doesn't fall apart as I'm piping, I like to put a little bit of tape to hold it together. I then fill the cone with my melted chocolate, and having done that, I fold the opening over and over again to seal in the chocolate. And this also makes it much easier to squeeze out the white chocolate as I'm decorating my cookie. And then snip the tip to make a very small hole. To add this final garnish, you simply go back and forth over the cookie in a zigzag pattern, just drizzling a thin ribbon of white chocolate over the surface. You don't need a lot of white chocolate, just a little bit. And that's all you have to do to make these cookies. The cookies are all done at this point, but do let them rest for a couple hours so that the chocolate settles. As with many of my cookies, I like to make extra or prep ahead so that I have them on hand for special occasions, or in this case for Christmas. The best way to store these cookies is in an airtight container, either in your fridge where they will last for several days, or freeze them for up to 3 months. But do place a layer of either parchment or cling wrap between the cookies so that you can take them out more easily. I hope that you'll enjoy these cookies as much as we do. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch my video. I really appreciate it. I love hearing from you, so please leave me a message or just say hi in the comments section. On behalf of my family, I would like to wish you and your loved ones a very joyous and Merry Christmas.